Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The decorations were soft and sweet, like everything I thought motherhood was supposed to be: pastel balloons tied in bunches, little onesies strung up on twine with clothespins, pink and gold confetti covering every surface like someone had tried too hard to make joy physical. My name, Jenna, was printed across the welcome sign in curling gold script, and someone, probably my mother-in-law, had hired a professional photographer who kept telling us all to smile like we didn't have splinters jammed under our fingernails. The cake was beautiful, sure. The people? Not so much. Everyone showed up with their polite smiles and fake excitement, like a jury trying not to look at the defendant while passing the verdict. My sister-in-law Kelly walked in 40 minutes late wearing a dress so tight it screamed "Look at me" louder than any baby announcement could. She floated in like she owned the goddamn house, even though it wasn't hers, and even though she texted me just last week that she might not make it because her mental health had been fragile lately. I should have known then it was a setup. Kelly doesn't miss an audience. And this? This was her stage. She brought a gift wrapped in Tiffany blue, shoved it into my hands like a bribe, and kissed me on the cheek like we'd ever been close. Then she turned to my husband, Mark, and gave him one of those hugs that lingered just a hair too long, like she was measuring something only she needed to understand. I watched his eyes flick to her chest and then away fast, but not fast enough. My stomach twisted, but I smiled, because that's what you do when you're 34, pregnant, and tired of losing every argument before it begins. You smile. The party itself dragged in a blur of awkward small talk, lukewarm mimosas, and games that made me feel like a prop in my own life. Everyone pretended to be thrilled for me, but I've lived long enough to tell when the claps are hollow and the compliments are barbed. It wasn't until the guess the baby food game was over that it happened, the moment that would crack everything wide open. We were gathered in a loose circle. Someone had just handed me a gift bag filled with more tiny socks than any baby could ever need, and Kelly decided it was time to shine. She took a sip of champagne, cocked her head to the side with that fake curious look she does when she's about to be an asshole, and said, "Well, let's just hope this one doesn't look like her." She gestured casually at me like she was pointing out a mismatched throw pillow. The room erupted in laughter. Not polite chuckles, no, real, full-on laughter, the kind that makes your ears buzz and your heart cave in on itself. I looked around, stunned, thinking surely someone would say something. But no. My best friend Sam's jaw clenched. My mom looked at her lap, and Mark laughed. He actually laughed. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not snapped. Snapping's too fast. This was slower, colder, like a glacier breaking loose after years of pressure. I smiled back at Kelly, wide and bright, and made a mental note. She'd just made her last mistake. I didn't say a word. Not then. I finished unwrapping the gifts, posed for a few more photos, even thanked her for coming. But inside, I was already rearranging the chessboard. That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the distant buzz of Mark snoring, I climbed into the attic and pulled out the small, red leather photo box I'd hidden under the old Christmas lights. I hadn't touched it in months. I told myself I wouldn't need to, that people like Kelly burn themselves eventually. But that was before today. Before she said that shit in front of everyone. Before Mark laughed like my dignity was the punchline. Inside the box was a stack of photos. Some from our wedding. A few from college. And one that didn't belong, one I'd printed and hidden away like a loaded weapon. It was taken on our couch in our house. The lighting was dim, but it was clear enough to see what mattered. Mark, half asleep, shirtless. Kelly, in his t-shirt, curled into his side, her hand resting on his stomach like she owned the space. I'd found it on our home security footage almost a year ago, late one night, after noticing the camera angle in the living room had been adjusted slightly off-center. At first, I convinced myself it didn't mean anything. That they were drunk. That it was innocent. But the more I watched, the less innocent it looked. The way her hand moved. The way his mouth opened slightly in sleep, and she smiled like she knew something I didn't. I didn't confront him. I didn't say a damn word. I just kept watching. Waiting. Planning. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Sam. "It's time." She replied instantly. "Hell yes." "You want help?" I typed, "No. Just watch." Then I opened my private photo album, uploaded the image, and added a single caption. 2 days. Then I went to bed next to a man who thought he'd gotten away with everything, while his sister slept in her smug little world, clueless that she'd just signed her own social execution order. And me? I finally slept like someone who was done playing the nice girl. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like the click of an upload button. There's a moment, right before a storm hits, when the wind slows down just enough to make you think maybe you imagine the warning signs. Maybe the sky isn't about to split in half, and maybe the gut feeling clawing at your chest is just anxiety playing tricks. That was me about a year ago, convincing myself I was being paranoid, overthinking, hormonal, tired, whatever excuse made it easier to not face the truth head-on. But the thing about instincts is, they don't care about your excuses. They whisper whether you're ready to listen or not. It started with something small, almost laughable now. A necklace. A silver chain with a tiny gold charm I'd picked up at a little antique shop on our honeymoon, nothing expensive, but it had meaning. I wore it constantly, except that one weekend I flew to visit my sister in Phoenix. When I came home, it was gone. I searched every drawer, under every couch cushion, even inside the washer in case it slipped out in the laundry. I asked Mark if he'd seen it, and he gave me that vague, distracted, probably in your purse answer that tells you he didn't even look. I let it go. But then, 2 weeks later, I saw it. Around Kelly's neck. I was sitting on the porch, drinking tea, trying to calm the storm in my head, and she showed up unannounced, like she always does. She flounced up the steps in ripped jeans and a cropped sweatshirt like she was auditioning for some reality show I never signed up for, and there it was, swinging gently between her collarbones, my necklace. She saw me looking, smiled sweet as syrup, and said, "Oh, this old thing? Found it in my car, must have been one of my friends." I nodded, but I knew right then. It was mine. She lied. And worse? She wanted me to notice. That night, I bought a small home security camera off Amazon. 2-day shipping. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't mention it to anyone. I installed it in the living room, high up on the bookshelf, positioned perfectly to cover the couch, the kitchen doorway, and a portion of the hallway. I told myself it was just to feel safe while Mark traveled for work, but that was bullshit. I wanted to know. Not think. Not assume. Not guess. I wanted the truth, cold, solid, recorded. For weeks, nothing happened. Life rolled on, dull and deceptively normal. Then, one Tuesday night, Mark told me he was working late. I believed him because that's what you do when you've built a life with someone. You choose belief over logic, even when the facts are piling up like bodies in a bad crime show. But curiosity won, and I checked the camera the next morning. They were there. Mark and Kelly. On my couch. In my house. It wasn't full-blown sex, but it didn't need to be. He was shirtless, his eyes half closed, legs stretched out like he lived there alone. She was curled against him in one of his old t-shirts, her hand tracing lazy circles on his stomach. They weren't talking. Just lying there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Comfortable. Familiar. Intimate. My throat closed and something sharp twisted in my ribs. I watched it over and over, trying to find some version where it meant nothing. But there was none. I screenshotted the frame, printed it out, and locked it away like a poisonous secret. And I waited. I played the long game because I knew Kelly. I knew she couldn't help herself. She was always poking, always trying to see what she could get away with. She wanted that moment at the baby shower. She planned it. That wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was bait. A public hit designed to humiliate me, to remind me where she thought I stood in the family pecking order. What she didn't realize is I wasn't standing anymore. I was kneeling behind the curtain with a match in one hand and gasoline in the other. The night after the shower, I sat in my kitchen and looked at that photo again. It had been tucked away for nearly 18 months, since April. That's almost a year and a half. The timestamp on the footage read April 5th, late evening. I remember it because that was the day Mark said he missed his flight home. That was the first time I felt truly, physically sick in my own house. And now? Now it felt like armor. I knew what I had to do. Not scream. Not confront. Not cry. Just remind him who the fuck he married. I put on a clean shirt, brushed my hair, and snapped a selfie in the hallway mirror, holding the envelope with the photo tucked inside. I smiled, real slow, the kind of smile that says you made your move. Now it's my turn. Then I sent it to Mark with one line. Dinner tonight? Just us. Because if Kelly wanted a stage, then I was more than happy to build one. But this time, I'd be the one holding the script. The place I picked wasn't anything fancy, just upscale enough to force everyone into good behavior. The kind of restaurant where the waitstaff wore pressed shirts and whispered like they were guarding state secrets. Private booths tucked into corners gave people the illusion of privacy, and soft yellow candlelight made everything feel more forgiving, more intimate, more dangerous. I knew Mark would think I was trying to make peace, maybe smooth over the awkwardness from the baby shower with one of those "let's not let this ruin us" conversations. But what I was actually doing was setting a trap so neat and quiet it could have been used in a courtroom. He arrived 5 minutes late, which was pretty much on time for him, still wearing his work clothes, tie loosened just enough to look effortless. When he saw me sitting there with my hair done and that calm, unreadable smile on my face, he smiled back like this was just a regular dinner between a husband and his very pregnant wife. He kissed my cheek, slid into the booth across from me, and gave me that boyish look I used to think meant love, but now understood meant absolutely nothing. We ordered drinks, his usual whiskey neat, my ginger ale in a wine glass for appearances, and I let him talk first. "You look good," he said, eyes roaming my face like he was trying to find a version of me he still recognized. "I'm glad we're doing this. Things have been tense lately, and honestly, I think we're finally past all the stress. The baby's almost here, the family's calming down, and I don't know, it just feels good. Normal, even." I nodded, let him have that little speech, watched him sip his drink and lean back in that lazy way men do when they think the game is already won. He kept talking about work, about the house, about how Kelly was probably just trying to be funny at the baby shower, and how I shouldn't take it so personally. I smiled again. I didn't say much. I just listened, timing everything, waiting for the exact right moment, because the trick to a good reveal isn't the evidence, it's the silence that comes before it. The envelope was in my purse, plain white, no markings, nothing dramatic. I pulled it out slowly, almost casually, like it was just a receipt or a bill, and slid it across the table toward him without a word. He blinked, confused for a second, before picking it up. His fingers hesitated on the flap, probably thinking it was some heartfelt letter or apology or God knows what else men expect from women who've been wronged, but keep showing up anyway. But then he saw it. One photo. A single printed still from the security camera. Mark. Shirtless. Eyes closed. On our couch. And beside him Kelly. Wearing his old t-shirt. Holding his damn hand like they were some kind of tragic love story caught in the quiet moment between guilt and lust. He didn't even try to lie. He just stared at it, color draining from his face like someone had unplugged his soul. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I picked up my drink and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. Then I leaned forward, kept my voice low, and said, "You laughed at her joke." I just returned the favor. There was something beautiful in how simple it all was. No screaming, no crying, just the weight of truth dropped into his lap like a brick. He looked like he might vomit, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely at peace. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and left without touching the food or glancing back. In the car, I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and opened the album. I stared at the photo one last time. Then I deleted it from my device, but not before sending it to one very specific group chat, the family group chat, the one with Lori, Kelly, Mark, a few cousins, and his God-fearing aunt who still calls me darlin' in text messages. I didn't add a caption. I didn't need to. The silence of that image would scream louder than any words ever could. And as I drove home, headlights cutting through the night like scalpels, I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not revenge, not satisfaction, not even relief. Just clarity. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it burns the whole damn house down. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. Sunday mornings in our family have always followed a strange, almost cult-like rhythm. Some went to church, some stayed home to garden or nurse hangovers, but everyone somehow managed to pretend they were peaceful, put together people on that one sacred day. Texts usually trickled in about brunch spots, passive-aggressive Bible quotes from Aunt Rita, or blurry photos of pancakes captioned with things like, "God is good." But not this Sunday. This Sunday started with a different kind of prayer, the kind that comes in the form of a bomb, dropped silently into a digital space where everyone could see it and no one could unsee it. I waited until just after 9, the sweet spot when most of them would be either sitting in pews or plating their eggs. Then I opened the group chat labeled Family Fam Bam, which, let me tell you, had been misnamed from the start. I attached the photo, the same one from dinner, the one I'd handed Mark with a straight face and eyes that didn't blink, and hit send. No caption. No warning. Just truth, raw and rotting. I didn't stay in the chat to watch the first responses. I didn't need to. I knew what was coming. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee, added a little cinnamon the way Sam showed me years ago, and sat at the kitchen table waiting for the world to catch fire. It didn't take long. First came Lori's call. I let it ring, watched her name flash across the screen in bold letters, and ignored it with the same grace she'd ignored every sideways comment Kelly ever made about me. Then came the texts, one from Kelly that simply said, "WTF," with 4 question marks, because of course, she's the kind of woman who panics in punctuation. Then a second one followed, "You don't understand what you're doing." And finally a third, this time no words, just a voice memo I didn't bother to open. If her voice was going to shake, I wanted her to wonder if I heard it or not. "Mark?" Silent. Which was loud enough. 10 minutes later, Sam showed up at my front door wearing sweats and that wild smirk she saves for exactly this kind of chaos. She held up a brown paper bag in one hand and a bottle of cheap mimosa mix in the other, and said, "I brought bagels, booze, and zero judgment. Let's fucking go." We sat on the couch, barefoot and loose, watching my phone buzz across the table like a live grenade someone forgot to disarm. The group chat was unraveling in real time. Cousin Jared sent a single question mark, followed by, "Is that real?" Then Rita, sweet, sainted, judgmental Rita, replied with a paragraph about sin and temptation, somehow managing to quote Corinthians while still blaming me for airing dirty laundry. Lori tried calling again. Then she sent a message, directed only at me, "We need to talk." Alone. "It's about Kelly." Sam read it over my shoulder and raised her eyebrows. "You think she's about to deny it or double down?" I shrugged, chewing on a sesame bagel like it was the last food I'd ever eat as a civilian. "Doesn't matter. She doesn't get to steer the narrative anymore." It was around then that Mark decided to make his dramatic entrance. There was no text, no call, just a hard knock on the front door that rattled the frame like he expected it to give way. I didn't rush. I stood up slow, walked to the door, and opened it just wide enough to see his face, pale and frantic, and trying not to look guilty. His voice was tight, almost panicked. "Jenna, we need to talk. This is getting out of control. You don't know what you've done." I leaned my head against the doorframe, calm as ever, and said, "I told you, next time you pick a side, stay on it." Then I closed the door before he could say anything else. He stood there for a few more seconds, like maybe the weight of his silence could somehow crack the wood between us. It didn't. I walked back to the living room, picked up my drink, and toasted to the fact that I hadn't cried, screamed, or begged, not once. That right there was the victory. But Lori's message stayed on my mind, and not because I wanted her forgiveness or clarity or some maternal version of damage control. It was the wording that bothered me. It's about Kelly. Not, it's about Mark. Not what happened. Just Kelly. Like she was the key to something deeper, something I hadn't uncovered yet. And the way it was written, it didn't sound like a defense. It sounded like a confession. Sam noticed my expression and nudged me with her foot. "You're thinking about it, aren't you? Meeting her." "I might," I said, staring at the screen. Just to hear what kind of bullshit she's about to spin. But truthfully, something inside me knew Lori wasn't about to defend her daughter-in-law or even her son. The tone of that message didn't read like someone who wanted to protect her family. It read like someone who was preparing to burn the whole house down before someone else could. I took another sip, let it sit on my tongue, and said out loud, mostly to myself, "If there's more, I want to know all of it." And I meant it. Because the truth, once you get a taste of it, becomes addictive. And I wasn't just going to stop at one slice. Not anymore. The diner was one of those old places with sticky vinyl booths, chipped mugs that probably hadn't seen bleach since the Bush administration, and a waitress who called everyone Han, regardless of whether you looked like someone's granddaughter or someone's parole officer. Lori had picked the spot, which told me two things right away. She didn't want to be recognized, and she wanted to control the environment. But what she didn't seem to realize was that I'd already stepped outside her little circle of polite control, and I wasn't going back inside it, not today and definitely not for her. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a black coffee in front of her, untouched. Her hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place, and she wore sunglasses even though the sky outside was the color of a dirty bathtub. When she took them off, her eyes weren't angry or sad or even worried. They were calm. Dead calm. Like she'd already gone through whatever emotional fallout this moment required and had come out the other side with a script and a goal. I slid into the booth across from her, said nothing. Let the silence stretch long enough to force her to speak first. When she finally did, her voice was steady, her tone so careful it felt rehearsed. "I'm not going to ask you why you sent the photo," she said, folding her hands neatly on the table like she was at a goddamn board meeting. "And I'm not here to defend anyone. I just think there's some context you deserve." That word, context, sat between us like a ticking bomb. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. I just waited. And she took that as permission to continue. "You're not wrong," she said, her fingers tightening slightly. "The photo is real. What you think you saw happened. But what you don't know is that Kelly isn't exactly who you think she is. She and Mark, they're not just close because they grew up together." There was a long pause, long enough for the waitress to swing by and pour me some coffee I didn't ask for. I let it sit. Lori cleared her throat and continued. "They're twins," she said finally. "Fraternal twins. Born 4 minutes apart. But not to me." My body went cold, then hot, then cold again. I didn't speak because I couldn't trust what would come out of my mouth. "She was born from an affair," Lori continued, quieter now. "Your father-in-law had a child with another woman while I was pregnant. We found out when the girl was only a few months old. The woman, she didn't want her. Didn't want any of it. She dropped the baby off, no note, no warning. And I took her in." "You adopted her," I said finally, the words sharp in my throat. "Yes," Lori said. "Legally. Quietly. We told everyone she was mine. It was easier. Cleaner. And Mark knows." "Of course he knows," she said, a little too fast. "They've known since they were teenagers." The implications of it all hit me like a truck going 60 in a school zone. Mark and Kelly weren't just siblings, they were half-siblings, raised as twins, aware of the truth for years, and yet, that photo, that moment on the couch, that wasn't sibling affection. That wasn't innocent. That was something else entirely. So what was it then? I asked, unable to keep the venom out of my voice. Some kind of, what, emotional blackmail? Twisted revenge sex? A secret they thought I wouldn't uncover. I don't know, Lori said, and for the first time, she looked tired. But I know they're not normal. That bond. It's always been too tight. Too secretive. And now you've blown it wide open. I leaned back, my hands folded across my stomach, the baby kicking softly like even he was reacting to this mess. Lori looked at me again, eyes sharper now. I'm asking you to delete that photo, she said. Don't ruin what's left of this family. And that's when I realized something deep in my bones. That sentence, right there, was everything wrong with the world. Don't ruin what's left. As if I was the one swinging the wrecking ball. As if their secrets weren't already termites chewing through every beam of this house long before I dared to shine a light on it. I smiled then. Not politely. Not sweetly. But the kind of smile you give when you've stopped pretending to care what the other person thinks. That family was already ruined, I said, standing up slowly. I just lit the match. She didn't follow me. Didn't call my name. Just sat there, fingers still laced together, watching me go like she knew there was no point in chasing after something that had already caught fire. That night, I went home and walked into the nursery, the one Mark had barely helped paint, the one Kelly had mocked with her little jabs about colors and cribs and how some people just didn't have the eye for baby decor. I sat down on the soft rug and started folding tiny clothes into drawers that still smelled like cedar and lavender dryer sheets. The quiet was thick, but not heavy. There was a framed photo on the shelf, me and Sam at the baby shower, arms around each other, both of us laughing in that rare, real way where you know the person beside you would go to hell with you and still bring snacks. I picked it up, stared at it, and let the silence hold me. And in my head, I heard myself say it, not loud, not dramatic, just true. I used to think keeping the peace meant staying quiet. Now I know better. Now I know sometimes you need to break the silence so loudly it echoes into every room where lies were told and secrets were protected. Because peace without truth isn't peace at all. It's prison. And I don't live in prisons anymore.